Residents of several towns in Kenya have experienced tremors following an earthquake that occurred this evening some 89 kilometers south of Dar es Salaam. Now, the U.S. Geological Service said the earthquake, which occurred some minutes after 8 p.m., had a preliminary magnitude of about 6.0. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries, though the shaking was widely felt across the region. People near the epicenter reported that the quake came in two waves. First, there was around 8 to 10 seconds of vibration, and then a second long shock.
Si Sri rasi galang sa niya ikaw galangan kasi sa niya Askris gambo gambo.
Kucing angin lah.
Dengar kali suaranya kan.
And let's turn to some weather now. That severe storm slamming the Midwest with winds topping 100 miles an hour, leaving 1 million people without power. Ginger has been tracking the latest on this for us. Ginger, good morning.
TJ, good morning. A remarkable radar image that blasted across Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. That is called a derecho, which I'll explain in a moment. But more than 480 severe storm reports. Every dot you see on the map is the type that takes down trees and power lines. That's a lot. Look at this video out of Iowa. Gusts up to 112 miles per hour. At least 50 people were injured near Cedar Rapids. You had reports of DeWitt, Iowa to Chicago having 80+ mile per hour winds. Look at that rooftop. That's Lakeshore Drive on the right, and that roof being scattered like confetti. Trees were down in some of those Chicago suburbs, and certainly a lot of problems this morning with nearly 1 million customers still without power. So that derecho, what is it? You hear that name? It's a long line of thunderstorms that covers more than 250 miles. Easily did that with greater than 600 miles covered by those severe storms.
Half a dozen states in the Midwest are cleaning up this morning after a rare storm with 100-mile-an-hour winds that tore across hundreds of miles. The so-called derecho packed the power of a hurricane 1,000 miles from any ocean. It caused significant damage across Iowa and parts of Wisconsin and Illinois yesterday. Adriana Diaz is in Chicago. Adriana, what's the damage there?
Good morning, Michelle. Well, we're in the neighborhood of Rogers Park on the north side of Chicago, and the National Weather Service says a tornado passed through this neighborhood. And look at what it left behind. There are downed trees on top of cars all across this area. Then as the tornado pushed east, it actually went over Lake Michigan, which is just a few blocks away. The weather moved in quickly, it struck fast, and it tore through the Midwest in a matter of hours. The downpour moved into Iowa Monday, leaving hundreds of thousands without power. Officials issued travel advisories as the storm downed trees and blocked roads. Pummeled by the high winds, a child's clubhouse started rolling like a tumbleweed. There were people inside this hockey arena when the roof was blown away. No one was hurt. A Des Moines postal worker also escaped injury when his truck was crushed by a falling tree.
I heard a whistle. I never heard a siren, but I think it was the wind whistling because it was just blowing really hard.
When the storm reached Wisconsin, it uprooted trees and downed power lines. Huge branches crashed into streets and houses. One person said the winds came without warning.
I was hearing all these different sounds. I turned and looked out the window and realized it was full frontal force of the storm coming in.
Emergency crews worked to right a semi-truck overturned on the highway. The storm also uprooted trees here in Chicago. and more than 100 miles away in Moline, Illinois.
3-4 blocks down, they had a real big tree down on a power line.
There were some reports of injuries in Iowa where people were trapped in buildings and inside cars about 100 miles west of here in Dixon, Illinois.
10 million acres of farmland was flattened. KCCI's Chris Goffner talked to a central Iowa farmer who lost his corn crop, and Chris tells us what help could be available for farmers.
Brian Rumbaugh says this was going to be a good corn crop, but then Mother Nature hit.
It's all broke off.
Monday's storm flattened most of the 450 acres of Rumbaugh's corn crop in northwest Jasper County.
If you look at my foot, you can see that corn is flattened down about 4 inches off the ground.
He says in 50 years of farming, he's never seen a natural disaster like this.
This is the worst one I've ever had. We had a tornado go through a while back, but tornadoes 300-400 feet wide. This just everything.
He's in the same position as countless other Iowa farmers. The state estimates the derecho damaged at least 10 million acres, almost a third of Iowa crops. Rumbaugh says he'll be covered, though. Crop insurance will likely pick up the bill.
Probably 34 years I've had, and thank God. You know, that's what you have insurance for, the fail-safe, but I've never collected a dime, which is good. So now they owe me.
State officials say as they assess the damage, farmers may be in line for federal assistance.
Part of that federal assistance could be a Small Business Administration declaration or a U.S. Department of Agriculture secretarial designation, which provides resources for impacted farmers.
All the devastation comes amid a year Iowa farmers were already dealing with a trade war and COVID-19. But even though 2020's seen misfortune after misfortune pile up one on top of another, Rumbaugh says he's been farming long enough to know it comes with its highs and lows, and eventually things will get better.
It is what it is. You live long enough, you're going to have these, and it's not always cherries.
In Jasper County, Chris Goffner, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
Finally tonight, an extraordinary rescue and now an unbreakable bond.
Stay there! Stay there! Don't move!
The instructions were simple, but what was about to happen, incredibly hard. Pennsylvania resident Dan DeGregorio, along with other drivers and nearby residents, mobilizing after coming across this family trapped in rising waters during Tropical Storm Isaias. Daiso Duo and his family, including 4 children, stranded and in danger just west of Philadelphia when suddenly a miracle appears.
Out of nowhere, this backhoe comes out around the corner. And we immediately started screaming at the guy driving it.
Hold on to that kid.
Dan and 3 other Good Samaritans, all strangers, jumping into action.
And we're yelling at the dad, who's now about 15 feet away from the car with his baby in his arms. And he's almost going under, so we tell him, get back to the car.
The group making a human chain.
You got him?
Yeah. Toss the kids.
Yeah, but toss the kids.
The frightening moments right there on the faces of those young children.
Grab his hand.
And this chilling moment with 12-year-old Ansuma.
Stand up straight. Stand up straight. Stand up straight.
Almost slipping away, Dan grabs him by the wrist.
I'm not letting go. I'm not letting go of this kid. If this is what I was put here for, to save this one life, I'll do it.
All of them making it to safety. That was 2 weeks ago. And just yesterday, the group of heroes and the father they rescued coming together, reliving those wild moments.
I was literally crying for my kid, but for me, I was fine because I know that water couldn't take me anywhere. But it was just for the kids.
Now connecting on solid ground and building a bond.
After everything, I couldn't stop telling them thanks.
For the rescuers, it was the only choice. When it's the right thing to do, there's no room for hesitation.
None of us had a second thought to not do this. You can't forget something like that. And that's something that's family.
An incredible rescue. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Yamas. Stay safe. Good night.
This morning, firefighters spread thin as multiple wildfires scorch Southern California. Thousands of crews are battling at least 3 major fires, more than 21 square miles devoured since Wednesday.
I got in the car. It was so hot from the flames being around me. I thought I was going to blow tires.
The so-called Lake Fire is burning just outside Los Angeles, tearing through more than 11,000 acres already. Officials warn that thousands of homes and businesses are now threatened. Others have already been destroyed.
The neighbor's house was already engulfed when I left.
Firefighters in the heart of the battle, surrounded by a deep red and daunting landscape. While the areas the fire already passed through are nothing but ash and the remnants of burned out buildings. In Corona, a fire sparked just outside this neighborhood. At least 275 firefighters racing to stop the flames as the fire burns right next to homes. Just 30 miles north, the ranch fire exploded to 3,000 acres Thursday afternoon. Evacuations in effect right now.
It's going to be a hot, dry summer, and it's going to be a very, very hot, dry weekend.
Temperatures in the area dipped Thursday night, but now officials say triple-digit heat and low humidity will create dangerous and erratic conditions throughout the region.
We have a low in the fire because of the cloud cover, but we're concerned that once this cloud cover goes away, they're going to see a lot of active fire activity.
The conditions perfect to form so-called fire tornadoes like this one seen Thursday.
Day after it rained heavily in the national capital, the city saw waterlogging at several places, with many roads completely inundated, leading to massive traffic jams. After the Minto Road incident, the preparedness of the MCD and Delhi government yet again failed to prevent waterlogging. Here's Akshay sending us a report from the streets.
Right now we are in the national capital, and after just a day of rain, the city has again witnessed waterlogging, inundated roads, and several people stuck in traffic jams. I would like to show you here. I am right now near Tughlakabad underpass, and there is a car which has almost drowned. The cops are coming out of the car which got stuck in the water. This is the situation. This is the pathetic situation, in fact, which the national capital is in. It rained the entire night yesterday, and this has led to several incidents of waterlogging across the city. We'll try and speak to some of the people who travel every day. बात बताइए, आप यहाँ से रोज जाते हैं?
Let's begin with the devastating floods in China that have affected more than 63 million people this summer. China's emergency management officials said Thursday the floods that have continued since June have left more than 200 people dead or missing and destroyed 54,000 homes.
Among relief work, we always put the relocation of affected people as a top priority of our work. More than 4 million residents have been evacuated to safety, marking the largest number over the past years.
The floods have caused economic losses of some $25.7 billion, which is more than 15% higher than the average flood damage in China over the past 5 years. A total of 634 rivers have seen floods this year across China, with large freshwater lakes, including Yangtze River, seeing water levels rise alarmingly.
44 straight days of rain and counting. South Korea is battling floods and landslides as it endures the longest monsoon in 7 years. At least 16 people have been killed and thousands more displaced. The downpour has paralyzed Seoul, and the situation is at a tipping point. Local officials say close to half of the capital's 25 wards are at risk of flooding. Lim Yeon-suk reports.
Water levels at this Kunnam Dam in South Korea's side of Indian River have been rising in recent days, putting authorities on high alert. South Korea's authorities blame North Korea's releasing of water since Monday from its Hwanggang Dam across the border for the rising water levels. Under an inter-Korean deal, Pyongyang has to notify Seoul in advance before doing that, but it didn't this time. This Imjin River meets with the Han River further south, which is more densely populated. A dam burst could put hundreds of thousands of people in harm's way. Already in Seoul, major highways and roads along Han River have had to partly close because the water line for Han River had exceeded 8.5-meter level that calls for flood control measures. Many parts of South Korea have already been battered by heavy rain. Early Thursday morning, 5 people, including the driver, were rescued from this bus in Gyeonggi Province as water suddenly filled this area. And about 40 people were evacuated to this shelter at an elementary school in Cheoran County, Gangwon Province on Wednesday afternoon.
이불이고 뭐고 다 물속에 잠겨가지고 냉장고도 다 자빠지고 금방 가지도 못한대.
또 비가 엄청나게 쏟아져서 이장님이 이제 한탄강 수위가 빠르게 차고 있으니까 마을 주민분들은 이제 경로당으로 오셔갖고 대피를 하셔야 된다.
In another village, people had returned home for shelters after having to leave on Wednesday afternoon. These villagers say they are happy they still have their homes, although there's a lot of cleaning up to do. And they're unsure how long they will be able to stay since more rain is expected in coming days. The military has also been called in to help with the rescue efforts and also to help the villages. Reports say more than 53,000 civil workers, police and soldiers have been dispatched as President Moon Jae-in urged all-out efforts to prevent further loss of lives. Lim Yan-suk, CNA, South Korea.
3 people have died after a passenger train derailed near Stonehaven in Aberdeenshire this morning and caught fire. The other 6 people on board have all been taken to hospital. 1 passenger, the train's driver and its conductor all lost their lives. The train was on its way from Aberdeen to Glasgow when it left the line. 1 carriage slid down an embankment. It's thought the train may have hit a landslip following bad weather overnight. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon is at the scene now. Lorna.
Yeah, Sophie, the derailment happened in the dip below us here. Investigators and emergency services remain at that floodlit site this evening. And while it is dry tonight, it was a very different matter overnight and early into this morning. There was appalling weather in this part of Aberdeenshire, and it's likely they will be looking at what role that weather may have played in causing this train to derail. The tangled wreckage of the derailed train. 1 passenger carriage halfway down a bank. Another carriage seemingly crushed in the force of the crash. The terrible images showing what's left of the early morning service from Aberdeen to Glasgow. The scale of the incident all too clear. Scotland's First Minister expressing her shock at the day's events.
This is devastating news. This has been a really tragic incident, and my condolences are with the loved ones of the 3 people who have lost their lives, and that includes the driver of the train. Clearly, this is an ongoing operation. I've just been briefed by Network Rail and the emergency services on that, but devastating news for the bereaved, but also for those who were on the train, and my best wishes go to those who sustained injuries.
The weather overnight was described as atrocious. Around the time of the crash, Network Rail published this footage showing the poor conditions, lines blocked. Heavy rain caused flash flooding in Stonehaven, the town nearby. Early indications are that the derailment in this rural part of Aberdeenshire may have been caused by a landslide. The emergency services working to get the injured to hospital and recover those who died, the driver, the conductor and 1 passenger on the train. Over the coming days, investigators will try to piece together what caused this tragedy to occur.
We really need to take the time to understand exactly what caused this event. The railway is an exceptionally safe mode of travel, but we just need to take the time to understand why this has happened.
The Queen, who is also currently in Aberdeenshire at Balmoral, sent a message of condolence, stating that the entire royal family joined her in sending their thoughts and prayers to those who had died and those who had been injured. That sentiment echoed by the Prime Minister.
One of the reasons that this accident is so shocking is, of course, that it is this type of accident on the railways is thankfully so rare. But our thoughts are very much with those who've lost their lives, their families, and of course those who've been injured. in the derailment.
For much of the day, smoke was seen billowing out of the valley where the wreckage now sits. A sombre marker of the scale and force of what happened here and the challenges that faced first responders on the ground. The emergency services this evening continuing their work to make the site safe. They're now joined by those investigating what caused the country's first fatal derailment in over a decade. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Aberdeenshire.
Our transport correspondent Tom Burridge is here with me now. Accidents like this are very rare now on the railways, but it does seem that the weather may have played quite a factor.
Yeah, the flash flooding in that part of Scotland seems to be the main factor, but it's worth noting that other lines in the area were closed this morning because of the poor weather, because of landslides. Network Rail was posting those videos, as we saw, showing just how bad the conditions were at the time as it cancelled services. Now, I'm told that this rail service was heading along. It seems that it hit heavy water before the incident on the track, and the driver stopped and possibly requested to move to another track adjacent to that before continuing. And then after that, the train derailed, possibly because of a landslide. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask whether any train services should have been running in that part of the country because of the poor weather. A report from the rail regulator in July warned about the worsening weather conditions in this country and the risks that poses for the railways. But yes, this type of incident is very rare. You have to go back 13 years to the last major derailment. But sadly, when a train derails, it's devastating. Often people are killed. If more people had been on board that service, it could have been much worse.
Tom, thank you.
Though the major outbreaks elsewhere in the world are still growing. More than 20 million cases have been confirmed and more than 750,000 people have died globally. More than a quarter of those have been in the United States, and the number of infections in Brazil and India is also continuing to grow. You can see here how many cases those countries are adding each day. India is still near its record peak of about 60,000 new cases a day. The US is trending downwards, however, with the figures hovering around 50,000 a day. Health authorities there say they are still in the thick of this outbreak. The World Health Organization says Beirut is experiencing a surge in coronavirus cases, with healthcare services knocked out by the deadly explosion 10 days ago. New pictures have emerged of the blast ripping through the city's oldest hospital. It was less than 2 kilometres from the centre of the explosion at Beirut's port. Patients and staff can be seen running for cover as the shockwave struck. The WHO says it's worried the scale of the emergency is sidelining protective measures against coronavirus.
Communities now have other priorities. Perhaps there's a little bit of COVID fatigue, and we have to re-engage them very strongly to make sure that the COVID response remains a priority for them.
Lebanon has had thousands of coronavirus cases recorded since the explosion. Global health experts say there's not enough scientific data on the COVID-19 vaccine that Russia has approved for widespread use. Only 2 months of human trials have taken place, far short of the usual testing standards applied to vaccines.
A diseased planet saved by Russian technology. That's how Moscow wants its world-first COVID-19 vaccine to be known. Russia only began human trials of its vaccine in mid-June, but Vladimir Putin says it's ready for mass production and he's tested it on his own family.
One of my daughters has been vaccinated. In this sense, she has taken part in the experiment.
Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund says 20 countries have already placed orders for more than 1 billion doses.
And we now have production capability of 500 million vaccines that can be produced in the next 12 months.
But stage 3 trials, where a broad section of the community is tested for side effects, are yet to take place.
And we expect clinical trials to start in UAE, Saudi Arabia, Philippines very soon.
Not everyone is convinced.
I hope that the Russians have actually definitively proven that the vaccine is safe and effective. I seriously doubt that they've done that.
If you miss out some of the bigger
clinical trials, then you won't necessarily have that data to be sure that a vaccine is either effective or safe.
Unlike other major research groups around the world, the Moscow institute behind this vaccine has yet to release any of its safety or immunity data, making independent verification of its efficacy virtually impossible. Russia plans to roll out the drug from next January, but the World Health Organization said it will only accredit the vaccine after exhaustive analysis of its effectiveness and safety.
Gauteng has recorded the highest number of fatalities in the last 24-hour cycle.
The morning sun brings little relief in a South African township called Alexandra. The storm has arrived in the frigid depths of winter, and the people who live here are virtually defenseless. We found hundreds of people seeking COVID tests and treatment at the local clinic, and the length of this queue would test anyone's endurance.
In my community, we have to bury a lot of people, and it's hard for us. It's really hard because they're really close to us, and we use the same tap or the same toilets, you know, and we don't have any sanitation inside the toilets, you see. So we're really scared.
Social distancing, please. Social distancing.
This country has the highest rate of infection on the African continent, but the reality on the streets is even worse than that. We joined Dimpo Mateo on her second attempt to get a COVID test. She had diarrhea, a fever, and shortness of breath.
Do you think you will be able to get a COVID test today?
By the look of things, I don't think I'll be tested today. You can see how long is the queue. People are too many.
Yeah. It makes you wonder whether we really know how bad this crisis is when...
It's really bad. It's really bad. I mean, people don't know if they are sick or not, you know, so obviously maybe the figures are up there.
It's one of the most densely populated communities in the country. 500,000 people living in a couple of square miles, including Dimpo's family, who share a tiny plot with 5 other households. Her sister Neo told me she's got exactly the same symptoms.
Can you isolate here?
Not really, because there's 7 of us in the house and it's not really possible.
How many people live in this compound?
There's 4 people in that house and there's 2 in there, and in that other house there's 5 of them. Oh, and there's an old man that lives alone in the other, about 19.
19 people in this compound?
Yeah.
Neo tried to get a COVID test at 3 local clinics. Eventually, she paid at a private facility and tested positive.
I'm scared that my mom is old, you know, and she's the one who's busy bringing me food, whatever I need, she brings it. So if I infect her, I'd feel very bad.
It's
Yes.
not a good situation.
It's not a good situation. And you can see, Alexander, we've got small houses. How are you going to isolate yourself as an elderly person from the other person who's got COVID?
Chronic in the middle.
The fear and insecurity which cloaks the residents of this community is shared by those charged with looking after them. COVID-19 tests are provided to hard-pressed community health workers, but they have to wait for weeks to get the results.
So, as it have tested last week, I'm still waiting for my results. I don't know when they will be back. We have a week right now.
You could be positive right now.
I don't know. You see?
And you're working in the community.
You see? I'm busy with the community. I'm busy with my colleagues.
But this is a problem, isn't it?
You see? So that's a problem. You can't test and come back to work.
Government ministers have raised the alarm as the total number of infected hurtles towards 500,000. But the people of Alexandra know everyone's at risk as they grapple for ways to survive. John Sparks, Sky News, Johannesburg.